Some years, the majority of kids didn't even have Jewish fathers. There'd been a lot of alcohol abuse going on, and some of them were therefore victims of trauma from drunk parents. Like in chinuch, you have to continuously be on the pulse of knowing what the children of today need. Your ultimate goal is always going to be the same. How you get there has to change because the world is changing. There were times where maybe the hardest part was you're davening but not really feeling that it's going to happen. It's almost like this is what you do, but because it's a last resort, finances had run out and loans had been exhausted. After that amount of trying, you feel, okay, it's time to sort of take a little break. And then this miracle starts to unfold.
Rabbi Yechiel Emanuel, thank you so much for coming in this morning. Principal of a premier boys' school here in Manchester, of an incredibly growing community also here in Manchester, tremendous amount of local communal work, leading a revolutionary Kirev camp in Ukraine for close to 10 years, very active in supporting Ukraine Jewry post the 2022 Ukraine-Russia breakout, and the discovery of a Hasidic soul. So much to unpack here. Take us back to where this all started, your upbringing in London and to date, and then we'll tap into different various points along your journey.
So it goes a little bit before that, it predates that a little bit. Born in Eretz Yisrael, after a short while my parents relocated to South Africa, which my father's from. So I grew up there till age 8, and then they relocated to London. I was in the Menorah schools, the old location, and from there went on to Gateshead Yeshiva Ktana, Yeshiva Gedola, the Mir Yeshiva, then into a kollel which which today is run by Rabbi Shmuel Kaufman, was opened up by Rabbi Tzvi Goldblum. Fantastic, I think the first English kollel for English Jungelite, and that was revolutionary in what it was and what we learned and who came out of there. One of my best friends, also Talmud of Menorah Grammar, Rabbi Avram Heksher, reunited then and learned together for 6.5 years, and eventually ended up here in Manchester, starting in Whitefield Kollel for 4 years, and then joined school in 2010. And in 2018, I think it was, shul opened. That's where it's gone and how it's gone.
Right. Fascinating. Was Rabbonos and leadership, was it something which you had your eye on for all those years in Kollel and Eretz Yisrael?
It was a consideration. My late father-in-law, Dayan Lopin, was hugely influential from the time that I got married and onwards. Every Pesach and Sukkot, I would sit and do Shemush by him.
Wow.
And we were lucky that as the Hashgacha Pratis has it, the kollel that we learned there, it was opened up as a Gemara to learn Gemara. It was a Brisker Rosh Kollel, and we were learning Gemara, Shiteisus Rishonim. As it was, we learned Maseches Shabbos, Maseches Nida, Maseches Chulin, Gadal Smicha, Mikvahis, Chala, Ezo Neshech.
Everything you needed to set you up.
Yeah. Having said that, when my wife and I were dating, there were 2 things I told her that were an absolute no-no, and that was Kiruv and Chinuch.
Oh, well.
So the Ribono Shel Olam has his ways.
Okay, let's tap into a few of those. You mentioned, obviously, very briefly, there's a lot going on there. I think it was 2008, I was learning in Gateshead Yeshiva. Not in Gateshead Yeshiva, I was learning in a yeshiva in Gateshead, and a poster went up, must have been some point after Pesach, announcing a camp that was going to take place in Ukraine and promised to be revolutionary, an experience that no boy had ever imagined. And I'd grown up with the conventional, Chaverim Aguda kind of atmosphere. And there was a bit of a energy with a bunch of boys saying, let's try this out. And I don't know how we managed to convince our parents to let us do this, but we did. I think it was the second year that you had led this camp together with the incredible Nosson Feldman. Who laid the foundations for Camp Orach Chaim, and how did you get involved? And what were you hoping to achieve in the process of taking a bunch of UK yeshiva boys well out there into the middle of Europe to experience something
they never had before? So was that 2008?
I believe so.
Yes, that was our second year.
Yeah.
So what happened was Nosson Feldman, the great Nosson Feldman, was responsible for a lot of what you spoke about in your introduction. He had just returned to the UK, was studying at the time, still single. My wife and I had also returned in 2006, the summer of 2006. So this was literally Erev Purim 2007. We'd got to know Nosson Feldman whilst he was learning in Torah, come to eat with us a few times, eaten by cousins of us. And we had built up a little friendship, and we kept that up when he returned here shortly after us, educational year of end of 2006, 2007. And he shows up Erev Purim. I thought this was a Purim joke. And he says, would you like to run a summer camp in Ukraine? I was like, Nosson, not a chance. Is there any sanitation there? He's like, how in the world? To be honest, deep down, I did want to do it because it was a challenge. It was was outlandish, it was nuts. But and I'd love to do something that is a challenge. But there was no way I was going to take my wife and kids, 2 little boys,
two boys, young boys. I remember
to a place like that. Like, where are we going to stay? How are we going to? Can you shower? Can you see? No, I'll come back. I think Purim was a Thursday. I'll come back Motzei Shabbos. Literally, it wasn't much time after Havdalah, and he arrives with his laptop, and he shows us there's showers, there's a bath, there's toilets. There's actually, there's some sort of infrastructure there that you can, and it's a designated campsite. The Ronald Lauder Foundation has given it to them, and it looks sort of, okay, you'd be staying in an apartment. Above you would be where the guys would stay. All right, well, Nosson, what's your background? So you may want to do a podcast with Nosson about this, because he's got a fascinating connection which precedes that. A long time before, he had already been there as a schoolboy and built a kesher with Rabbi Bleich, the chief rabbi of Ukraine, and the kehillah there. I believe it was the Simchas Torah before. He'd been to Kiev for Simchas Torah, and they were bidding for the different Chosan Torah, Chosan Bereishis. And his bid was that I'll help to run your summer camp without a deficit and do something revolutionary. Which until that point, they had I think, kids from the US and leaders from there. It didn't seem to work out exactly how Rabbi Bleich wanted it to work out. It wasn't as conducive for the Ukrainian kids as it would be when we went. And Nosson said, look, I'm going to bring English guys, and the mindset will be a little different. They'll be a little older. The first year, it was literally the blind leading the blind. I didn't have a clue what we were doing in 2007.
There's so much to learn about the space, the places you were visiting, the nature of the boys that were coming to the camp. They weren't coming from the most healthiest of homes. I mean, there was a lot to take in.
Yeah, as far as the Ukrainian side. So Nosson the first year took care of a lot of that, and he had a whole team that was looking after the Ukrainian side of the camp. And we were just going to bring some bochrim, and that would help to offset some of the costs. That would help to hugely generate the ruach within the camp. And we would have some of our outings together and some of the trips separately. We went to that summer to learn about the Ukraine and to learn about the Yiddishkeit there and to find out. And even what we did find out, myself personally, was a fraction of what there was to find out. When we arrived there, Rabbi Bleich, being the character that he is and the leader that he was of that community at the time, it had a kollel, it had a hotel that was being built, which today is there as well. There was a whole infrastructure of a community that he'd built up from pre-perestroika. So he'd been there since I think 86. Wow. And there was a young gentleman whose nickname was Softy, forget his surname, and he'd been there before with the American camp that had been there. So he was assisting me in leading this group of guys. We took kids as young as 15 or 16, I think it was, which in hindsight was a little too young. And then slowly we upped as Baruch Hashem, the success was, and we learned from a few of the mistakes we made and concepts of the camp. The age group went up and went up and up. And for more or less 10 years, bar 1 year when my daughter was born, which we didn't go, we ran that camp. It was 2 camps. There was a Ukrainian camp and the Bochrim that were coming from Europe, and I think one even from Australia 1 year. And it ran together. We had Nosson presided over both. And I mainly had to do with the Bochrim, but we did do a lot of the arranging beforehand and the interaction with what would be the programs of 2 camps so that it would dovetail together and that we could do. I think most of the guys that came, yourself included, definitely had a trip of a lifetime. It was a completely different. That proves the point.
It was that good.
Some guys came 4 times, and we've kept up with all of them. Yeah. There's actually some famous podcasters who come to our camp. Yourself, Menno Reisner, He's still remember him being carried and because of his swollen foot down the street in Meshbush.
I wonder if it was my year that I was with him. Possibly,
have to ask him. It was Shlomi Zions.
Was there as well?
I believe we were the first ones to take him to Vilednik. Maybe even the first ones to Uman.
Interesting.
And the famous David Cohen.
Right,
we
course.
Definitely were the first ones. Wow. His song Hashem Provides started with slightly different words in our summer camp. But I'll leave him to publicize that if he wants to.
Fascinating. It's funny you say Shlomo Zions because the reason why I reached out to you when I did was because I was listening to an episode by Shlomo Zions and he mentioned the Viledniker and he mentioned the yacht site that's coming up soon, which triggered me to get in touch with you. Oh. And so it's just funny that I didn't know he was part of
He was a counselor in the Ukraine side.
Right.
And he wanted to come to Vilednik. I believe they were quite happy for him to come with us to Vilednik. And he joined us. could even be he came on the quarantine trip to Oman, but I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah, definitely the most incredible memories of the research you did at the time, taking us on those bus trips and just the detailed introductions to every cave that we visited. It was a very grounded and very much, it was an educational experience with, like everything else you mentioned, the atmosphere, the ruach, the boys, and teaching, just learning Aleph Beis with children, 15, 16-year-old Ukrainians who had no idea, coming from broken homes, very little Jewish education. It was an all-rounded, incredible experience, which, with yourself at the helm, was something very special. We'll get to Vilednik soon, but I just want to backtrack a little bit zoom out a little bit. And I was speaking to somebody in advance of this conversation who told me that he rarely hears a drosha from you without you quoting a Hasidic source, a good moifus, a good maisa, a good story from a Rebbe. How did a good monk's boy going through the conventional Torah education system of London get so latched onto this world? And what do we need to understand now about your current method of learning and teaching? How did you acquire a taste for this? And what keeps you coming back for more?
Right. It probably was only initially, I grew up in a home and my father's a tremendous Baal Machshava. He's a phenomenal Talmud Chacham whose mind never stops thinking in Torah. There was always a B'nai Yisachar on the bookshelf and very well used.
Right.
And the types of Torah that he would share with us would be very thought-provoking. He always encouraged us to think, to query, to ask, and to seek for a deeper meaning in everything that we were doing. So growing up as a teenager, it wasn't just that we did what we did. We were encouraged to know why we were doing it and to enjoy exploring, as well as having a fantastic good time and good education as well. We won't talk about the school that we were in or how much time I was there. But definitely, as far as Yiddishkeit is concerned and learning, it was very much think, use your machshava, think deeper. Once in yeshiva, I basically did the regular thing, trying to accumulate as much knowledge and get as much under my belt as I could. Very much encouraged also by my father to cover as much ground and attain and achieve as much as I could.
As the basis for what was to come.
For future of whatever that may be. In the Kollel that I learned in Tzvi Goldman, I remember there were a few times where job offers came up to move back to England. And he always used to say, I don't think you're ready yet. And the more of a Talmud Chacham you are when you leave, that is what you are. So not just yet. And then eventually we moved back here to England. But it was during that time that I was in Kollel. I always had an interest and a fascination from learning the Maharal, Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner's Sfarim, and Rav Dessler, which are machshava. In hindsight, I see that a lot of Rav Dessler and Rav Hutner were influenced in their thinking by certain Hasidic Keres as well. And my Rebbe, Rabbi Yechiel Emanuel, I would subtly, now in hindsight, I see, lace his droshes with deep thoughts of machshava that came from a variety of different Keres as well. And once I was in Kollel, happened to be learning in Ezra's Torah. At the time, I think it was the Kapishnitz Beis Medrash, little small tzrif. And during one of the Bin Astarims that I was there during lunchtime, I took out one of the Svarim there, Chassidish Sefer, and was fascinated by something that I read. Subsequently, I picked up a few of the Svarim of Rabbi Avraham Shor, which are hugely wide in their breadth of Keres from everyone, really. And then started to learn bits of those Svarim as not to the exclusion of the others.
Right.
Continued very much with the Meshech Chochma and jumping generations, Reb Shimon Schwab and his man Beis Hasheva.
Right.
Maybe the common theme between all of them is that they are very thought-provoking and begin a series of machshava that takes you further and further and further into the depth of Torah, and you're seeing connections, seeing how things... And my father always taught us to, and always encouraged us and enamored us with showing us how everything in Torah is connected and interconnected. And there's this, I was fascinated by Rabbi Moshe Shapiro's Shurim, which were also laced with a lot of this.
You never got to experience him in real life, did you?
Yeah,
you went to Shurim, right.
Yeah. And then I think just as time went on, learning those Sfarim and then being involved more as time went on with education of teenagers, young adults, young families, and seeing how a lot of the Torah that's written there is a timeless Torah, maybe even written more for today than ever before. And I'm always fascinated by thinking, at the time that these tzaddikim wrote their Sfarim, how many people had access to their writings? Very few. How much was able to be printed and what was able to be disseminated in the way that it was today? And today it's just so available and in such abundance and so necessary, and the thirst for it is huge. I'm also fascinated by the fact that it very much addresses the reality of life, the reality of challenges. And one of my Rabbi Yechiel Emanuel, who had a huge impact on me.
You stayed by him, didn't you?
Yeah, we lived by him together with my Chavos Yitzchak Kaufman. We were there for about seven weeks, I think it was, through an Elelsman, a life-changing experience for us. And his genius at understanding koiches hanefesh of people was also something that fascinated us. These Sforim very much address that, the depth of understanding in koiches hanefesh of people. And that's really what brought me to become so excited by the teachings of Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen, where the more and more I'm learning them and sharing them and seeing how real they are in my own personal life and in everyone's life that I seem to interact with, brings a huge amount of energy and appreciation to understanding who we are, how we work. And actually, the Rabbi Yechiel also he designed us, so he really understands how we work. And through the medium of their Torah, seeing how we can achieve so much and experience such dveikus to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and enjoy being Eden.
That's beautiful. But you always maintained exterior, like the regular Litvish kind of persona. Like it didn't affect. You managed to maintain it very much internally, as in terms of machshav, in terms of the thought and real life-changing behaviors, rather than it becoming part of your external image, so to speak.
Right. Well, I'm very proud of my Messiah.
Right.
And I know that both my parents and my Gateshead grandparents on both sides, our yichus goes back to all the way back to David HaMelech, and on my father's side, the Emanuel family is untainted back through Germany, through Spain, and
you're not going to start chappering with it now.
I'm not going to chapper with that. And then on my mother's side, I'm not going to chapper with that either.
Right.
So
fair enough. Beautiful.
Yeah,
it's something you mentioned, because I spoke to one of your members of your shul, and he said to me, it's Hasidus without the garb. That was the way he framed everything you're doing. Now we'll get to the shul soon, but that was just something but one thing you just mentioned I want to tap into, perhaps, is there a deeper reason why perhaps those Seforim, those writings were written at a time when so few people were able to reach them, and now so many years later, they're having such a broader impact on people who need it perhaps more than ever? Is there a reason why things were orchestrated that way, that they were not written in the generation for when they were actually needed?
I don't know. I mean, it's part of the Hashgacha Pratis. There was these tzaddikim who lived at that time. They surely were definitely impacting their own kehillas and the people around them, and in a significant way, and passing on what they had to their talmidim. But committing to writing a lot of their Torah, which would have required significant amount of time out of their schedules, and those times as well, the type of life they lived and the amount of places they lived in as well, and the movement that was going on, to be able to have that time and composure to be able to put that and commit that to writing in a way that it was, I feel it's almost like they knew this was going to happen.
Right.
And they knew there was going to be a need for it, and therefore they were committing it to writing for later on. I'm certainly feeling that today. And like you said, my minhagim of my family minhagim, the way I dress is because that's the way my father and my grandfather, and I'm very proud of that. I'm not going to change that. And my nusach is my nusach.
Right.
As far as the Torah is concerned, there's definitely a huge impact of that Torah that in personal avodas Hashem and in being able to share that with people, in addition to and without the exclusion of everything else that I've learned and been taught.
Very powerful, beautiful. You mentioned Vilednik, and I'd like to dig into that a little bit deeper. In 2023, I was very honored to have been on board to travel with and film a group of amazing individuals, including Rabbi Shlomo Bachner of Boina Olam fame, on a historic trip to Kerestir. And it was there at the grand finale dinner at the end of a long, incredible day that you addressed the crowd and shared your own deeply personal journey of secondary infertility. And along that journey, the discovery of the Viledniker, whose yahrzeit is coming up soon. Are you comfortable sharing with us your own miracle story and how you paved the way to discover the Viledniker and how it's carried on from there?
Yeah, sure, with pleasure. In fact, I've got permission
right.
from the various family members to be able to do that. Yeah, going back to our summer camp, part of the experience of running it over a few years brought us to the realization that we needed to be very careful and vet which bochrim we took along. As you mentioned before, the responsibility of knowing that we were interacting with kids who came from very compromised backgrounds, And this was their window of Yiddishkeit for 2-3 weeks in the year. And knowing that many of the Ukrainian counselors who today were married with their own families would clearly articulate to us that their entry into Yiddishkeit came through summer camp. Wow. That means that they came to a summer camp for 2-3 weeks. They were enamored by what they saw. It encouraged them to leave home. A lot of times they were living in villages or in towns and to come and join the dormitory of the school in Kiev. And that was school of Rabbi Bleich, and it was run very much as a Jewish day school with a dormitory and dorm counselors. And these were all people who infused within them a passion and a love for Yiddishkeit. So every year, one of the things we would do is try and get some of the married guys to speak to the boys that we brought along, the Bachrim, and tell them about the impact that they can have. And that also led us to realize that we have to be very careful who we bring along. A lot of these kids come from, as we said, compromised backgrounds. Some years, the majority of kids didn't even have Jewish fathers. There'd been a lot of alcohol abuse going on, and some of them were therefore victims of trauma from drunk parents. So knowing you're going to Ukraine where vodka is cheaper than water, and you're taking Bochrim, you've got to know that they're going to be responsible and not expose themselves in any sort of way to these kids in a negative way, or to the adults who wouldn't enjoy that at all. I think one of the things we always saw there was the way we dressed didn't really make a difference to them, because material clothing didn't mean much. Whatever they got, they wore. But they very much saw how we behaved, interacted, davened, benched, and were respectful to one another and to them. And that was hugely impactful to them. So part of that, what we did over the subsequent years, I think this would have been in 2008, 9, 10, 11, and going on, is that we would go, boys would apply, we'd do a little bit of vetting, and then on some occasions I'd travel up to Gateshead and sit and interview a few of them and then come back, or go and speak to the guys, the Rabbanim in the yeshiva. And when I was up in Gateshead, so I popped into my Rebbe, Rabbi Yechiel Emanuel, and he says, "Are you going to Ukraine? No, are you going to the Viledniker?" And I looked as blank as ever. I said, "Who's the Viledniker?" And he said to me, "Well, you should know that." Told me a little bit about the tzaddik. He said even Shlomo Carlebach has a song about him. One of the known stories. So on the way back from Gateshead to Manchester, those days it was still CDs. I got the CD and listened to Shlomo Carlebach's story. When I got back to Manchester, I called back Rabbi Yechiel, and he began to tell me a lot more about the tzaddik and his havtocha, people who come and just even just hold on to the handle, famously, of his tzion. And in his tzavor, he writes that if you can come and daven by me and do something in Nishmasi, I'll intercede on your behalf in Shemaim. And even if you can only just hold on to the handle of my keva, and even if you can just stand by the entrance of the Beis Hachaim, that I'll also intercede on your behalf. And he said, you've got to go there. So we started that year, I called up Nosson Feldman, and it's got to be part of our itinerary. And we did a standalone trip. I think it was one early Friday morning, late Thursday night, early Friday morning, to return before Chatzos on Friday. At that point, because it was in Ukrainian style bus, I think we commandeered some local bus, fit on as many boys as we could, and then we brought on our own chairs for down the aisles. You probably remember that.
Pretty much, yeah.
And squeezed on and got there halfway through. So the drive had to go to the scorching heat, yes, no air conditioning. No. I think the only air conditioning was some holes in the floor and some windows that didn't open.
The broken window. I think that was the air circulation.
And so we went there. We davened, and it became part of the itinerary. Eventually, it became part of the Kvorim trip, which I think is probably the most well remembered by anyone who's on the camp.
Yeah,
that Kvorim trip is most well remembered as being a chavaya of enjoyment, inspiration, fun, invigoration, and just an all-rounded amazing trip.
Sure. Vivid memories of Babia and the forests and Animamim down in the valleys there. I mean, it's
So those were all part of the experience. And my wife had never come with daven by the Viledniker because we had our two little boys at the time. I think they were 4 and 5 years old. And to go on that arduous journey in a virtual, hot box of heat in a bus to there and back wasn't something that she thought they would be able to do. Once they turned 9 and 10 years old. So I think we were talking here about either 2011, 2012. My wife thought, you know what, they'll come along and the Bachram will help to keep them entertained, and they sure did. I'm sure you remember those little chants of everywhere we go.
Yeah.
And they were there with probably still with their dummies and their caps and squeaky voices. And we made that trip. So this would have been the first time that my wife came to actually daven by the Viledniker. This would have been the summer of 2011. We went to daven by the Viledniker Tzaddik, and there by his tzion, not just by the entrance of the Beis Hatalmud, not just by the handle, right there inside the tzion. This must have been the fourth or fifth time that I'd been going, but the first time that my wife and children came with. At the time, we had our two boys, as I say, they were 8 and 9 years old. And as far as fertility goes, you were asking if I'm comfortable to speak about that. Yes, we've been through a variety of different fertility experiences. And seeing as the Rabbi Yechiel has put us in the public domain as part of our life's mission, so we are happy to share that with people. Maybe something that others who are going through it don't really want to share, but we see that as part of the responsibility of having tough kiddim that we have and the experiences that we've had, that people want to talk to us about it and ask us to share our experiences in a more private way. But with them, we're happy to do that and to tell them about the ups and downs that we understand, that we've been through ourselves, traveling to different countries, the experiences of it not working, several occasions and different the emotions that one has to go through, the preparation and all that goes with it. We're very, very aware of that, and we've stayed in touch, still keeping with organizations that are involved in fertility, particularly with Shmira and helping to facilitate the Shmira of a Yid for as many procedures as possible to be able to help people out with that. And
you have volunteers in the community.
So let's take, for example, today I used to do this with an organization here called Kivisi. It's now moved on to the organization called the international organization Ohel Sholom, and it's to ensure that there's a team of volunteers, as you say, a team of volunteers who trained with a fertility facility here in Manchester, have been there, have done some virtual training, have been into the facility as well, done a little bit of training in the facility to know exactly what to do when they're there, and then to go and oversee any type of procedure that would require overseeing. And it's an halacha upgrade in Bekeder Edech and Naman Beisorin, so it can be a man or a woman as long as they're over Bar Bas Mitzvah. From the organization point of view, it's got to be someone obviously who's super discreet and knows how to maintain discreetness. And besides for that, you sign a discretion form with the facility that if you divulge anything of personal information, that does bring a prison term. Oh. So, and just as a part of having been the other side of being a patient there and understanding what it means to be a patient, often can bring a lot of calm and understanding to people who are there. They get shocked sometimes. I come down in fatigues and all like as if I'm going into lab or into theatre. They're like looking like, oh, what are you doing here? And I tell them, I've also been a patient here before, and now I'm just doing it on this side and helping out with it. Today, fortunately, Baruch Hashem, we have with Ohel Sholom a strong team of volunteers and a very robust system whereby I think tomorrow morning we have another requirement there to be there tomorrow afternoon, and it gets very well worked out. They have someone designated to oversee it, and I'm just a partner in it today. I don't have the time to be involved as much as I used to, and that comes from the experience of being there over the years. And like I say, we're more than happy to share that with people. So we were then 8 and a bit years since our son was born. He was 8 and a bit years old, having, like you said, going through secondary fertility, having tried a variety of different options, being to different places, people wondering like, has this kollel couple got the money to go for Pesach to Eretz Yisrael, and the different comments that you get, and that
you just swallow it.
Yeah, you swallow it. I really get why it can upset people and really cause, with what they're going through already, is so, for some traumatic, for some just so involved and difficult to experience, and then you get that as well. Baruch Hashem, with us, it's sort of okay. If they only knew, they would feel really stupid saying what they're saying. But maybe not going to tell them and just move on. So we'd been all over. And then we decided that, okay, it's time to take a break. I mean, finances had run out and loans had been exhausted. And I think also your kochas hanefesh get to a point where after that amount of trying, you feel, okay, it's time to sort of take a little break. And then this miracle starts to unfold. So we go in the summer to, my wife comes to daven there, and we daven by the Vilednik tzaddik. And speed forward 10 months, it's B'shloisha v'esrim boy, on the 23rd of Sivan that year, my daughter is born. So the night before, being as it was an elective cesarean, I went into the Rachava of Shlita over here and asked him for a bracha. So he says to me, my bracha, tomorrow it's a day of Yeshua, it's B'shloisha v'esrim boy, in the Megillas Esther. It's the day when they sent out the second letters, Igros Shnius. And you don't need my brachas. It's a day of Yeshua. So it's a day of Nisim. You know, that the fact that this day has been the day that's chosen, unbeknown to you, that it was their choice and not their choice. Dashkocha pratis. You know, but obviously I was in touch with him, in touch with our uncle, Rav Ram Gorovitz Shlita, the Rosh Yeshiva of Gateshead, and that we were going in for this cesarean that morning. And incidentally, when I called them up afterwards, thanked for calling because they'd both been saying Tehillim for us.
Wow.
That was when my daughter was born. So my wife's grandmother had been nifta not so long before the Rebbetzin Rabbi Lopian. She was more endearingly known engaged as Auntie Tzippa. And my wife very much wanted to call our daughter after her grandmother, understandably, we're going to call her Tzippa. And we thought we decided that we wanted to add an additional name just as part of this amazing nace that she was born on that day, connected to Megillas Esther. And really, it was between the choice of either Esther or Hadassah, right. Which is, and knowing that there are those who know how names work and the combinations and the gematrias and the depth and et cetera, et cetera. So I made another trip to the Rachva to ask him about the names and what we should call our daughters. So I told him that one name's Tzippa. I'd spoken to Rav Ram Gorovitz to find out Tzippa is actually spelt with a hey, as it is in the Ksuba that Diana Bromsky presided over, the Siddur Kedushin of Rabbi Yechiel Emanuel. Right. And as she was at the time, Tzippa Levi, and went into the Rachava and told him about that. I heard about the importance of a hey in a girl's name, and we had a choice of either Esther or Hadassah. I just want to know which one goes better with Tzippa, because Tzippa is definitely going to be one of the names, and which one goes better. On a spiritual realm. Yeah, right, yeah. Right. So he left the room and he came back in a few minutes later, and in his unique, special way, he softly says to me, you know, Chazal say Esther zu Hadassah, Hadassah zu Esther. The mice in the cheshbonos, it comes out mamish gleich. It's exactly the same. It's whichever one you call it, it's the same thing. It's the same name. It doesn't really make a difference. And that was so that was his hachra. And we called our daughter her name, and then time went by. So, you know, we'll tell people about the fact that we'd been to daven by the tzaddik 10 months before. You'd get the more skeptical ones saying, you know, who says? And to be honest with you, I didn't really have an answer. Right. In addition, I must say that I was very, very kindly given Maftech Chana that year by the Mispalim in Rabbi Emanuel's shul in Prestwich, which I used to daven in. And it's a very well-known school of that as well. Exactly that when a person has that haftarah and they cry at the certain points of the haftarah, it's mesugel to be zeicher to have a child. And I'm sure all these combined together. I had a colleague at the time, Rabbi Yechiel Emanuel Shlita, who also on Erev Rosh Hashanah that year told me about a school of giving money to a Talmud Chacham. He had someone, mamish, as he called me at the time, mamish abal Shem Tavid, who you can give it to. And we did that. Did the school of Reb Chaim Palagi on Erev Shavuos of giving 52 prutas times 2, giving Gematria Ben, and giving that to someone, I think probably the same Talmud Chacham there through Rabbi Yechiel Emanuel Shlita. And a variety of probably other things as well. And I'm sure all of them combined definitely helped us in the Rabbi Shalom's, as the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says, by Avraham Avinu, when he davened for Avimelech, and then he was Zoich of Hashem Pakadei Sarah. So Rashi there brings, Kalam Yispal al-Chaveri, who tzarech lo yizdavu, and then in Tchila. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh says, what's he got to do with that? He was promised that by the Malachim 6 months or the year before, depending on how you learn. And so who says that it's almost belittling the Haftach of the Rabbi Shalom. So the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, Rabbi Chaim Kaufman, one of our Rabbeim, used to often tell us, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says that the Rabbi Shalom sometimes provides us with opportunities to do certain mitzvahs whose skula of that mitzvah is the thing that we've been asking for. And that's what the Rabbi Shalom did. He promised Aron when you're going to have a child, and then provided him with the mitzvah, where the skula of that mitzvah was to be zeicher to that child, and that was davening for Avimelech. So I'm sure all of these were all combined of that. And ultimately, the Rabbi Shalom gave us this amazing matana. But it was 7 years later, and one of my brothers-in-law calls up my wife, and he says, I've just been reading through the Toldos of the She'eris Yisrael, of the Vilednik Tzaddik, Rabbi Yisrael of Be'eben Yosef, and I see that his wife's name was Esther Tzippa. And that was like, wow. Unbeknown to us, we'd given our daughter
his wife's name.
Yeah. And so
you were never thought to explore that side of his family? Like it just didn't register?
It didn't even register. And to be honest, I'd read through the Toldos of the Viledniker, and almost like must have just glossed through that. Just not noticed it.
Yeah.
And the Hashgacha Pratis had it that way, that we should find out those years later. And I think, as I mentioned there at the B'nai dinner, that we became Viledniker Chassidim since then. Yeah. And whenever we've been to Ukraine as a family or even individually, one of the first stops we go to is to the Viledniker Tzaddik, and then we'll go elsewhere and try and make that, or at least if the Nasiya is there, it's on the way. We may go to other places, but that's where we're heading.
Cool. He didn't have children himself, did he?
No, he wasn't able to have children himself. And he gave this Havtacha, an amazing Havtacha, which Rabbi Yechiel Shlita told me throughout history, there was times where the communists didn't allow people to go to his cave because they noticed Jews and non-Jews would be going there and finding it fascinating that they were having their tefillas answered. So communists, well, this was a religious strengthening of sorts for different people. So they locked it up. But people said, well, it's fine. That's why he wrote in his Sabah that you can hold on to the handle. And they used to go and hold on to the klamela to get in there. And then they figured what was going on. So they barbed wired the whole Beis Hachaim. They said, well, that's fine. He wrote that you can even stand by the entrance. And then there was a place where they had cut into, and they used to go in. I think it would have been the first time we were there. There's a hospital, hospital, a Ukrainian hospital across the road from the Beis Hachaim. Almost like weirdly situated out of a town. It's a tiny little town as well. It's on this road leading into nowhere, probably up to Belarus. And you got this hospital, and one of the you'll remember our interpreter Gershon Zhenya,
of course.
And one of the doctors came out of the hospital and told us via the interpreter, that there's a tradition in that hospital that whenever they can, they get leftover oil from the inside of the tzaddik's kever, the oil of the Ner Neshama that's there, and they put a drop of oil into all their concoctions. It's a tradition that they've had that he got from the previous head, who got from the previous head. I don't know how far back that goes, but so even the goyim, they give a lot of respect to that place. And you'd never been going there, and Baruch Hashem, since then, can't even count how many times I've been back to daven there. But
have you taken groups from the community? Like, what's the access like?
So it's accessible. It's in the winter it's a little bit more difficult. In the summer it's really easy, just because of the roads. To get there, it's not your normal beaten track the whole way. But yeah, definitely been back there. We did actually went out as a shul trip just before the invasion of Ukraine. So it would have been the November before that. We did a trip with some from the shul, some people from the wider community in Manchester. A very memorable trip to Kiryat Tzadikim. I think it was over 3 days. And one of the highlights obviously was going to the Viledniker Tzaddik. Before that, we tried as a family to go there at least once a year, and we'd try and incorporate that as part of trip sometime or other. And since then, even since the invasion of Ukraine, I've Baruch Hashem been able to go there several times on the yard site, to be there and daven there. That would, by nature of how to get there, you have to fly via a different country, cross borders. It's a much more of an arduous journey, and it's didn't go last year on the yard site, but did it before. Went with my son and a few chevra before his chasna. Flew to Poland, and from Poland you have to drive to the border, walk across the border, and then on the other side there's still another 7-hour van ride to get there.
This is where the test is.
So
very, very beautiful, very powerful. I want to tap into the way you spoke at that event in Kerestir. And not many people can, like you said, are comfortable getting up, standing, definitely not in front of a hall, that many people to share the way you did. But I went back to listen to it and to rewatch the video before I sat down with you this morning. And I think it's clear that throughout your speech then, you weren't looking for sympathy or to rile up the crowd's emotions. You were speaking from your heart, obviously, in your trademark, composed, articulate fashion. But at the core of your message was really to give people perspective and understanding of those experiencing this struggle. And with this confidence and almost matter-of-factness, this is what we experience, this is what you need to understand about this, and really carving away those sentiments and the pain, but staying very much focused on that message. From your bird's eye viewer and somebody who's got every right to opine on this topic, I'm curious to understand, how did you approach this opportunity to get up there and speak in front of such a broad setting? How did you decide what to include, what to exclude, what was ripe, what was right for this specific circumstance? Share with us a bit about that.
Right, so I didn't have much time to prepare for it because I was only asked to do that a few days before the trip. I believe there was probably someone else who was meant to have spoken and pulled out. And then I was asked to join that trip, speak on the plane, as you remember there, just about going to Kiryat Tzadikim, and then to speak there about the organizer at the time. The organizers didn't say specifically speak about your story, but I took it as a message that really that's what they wanted. And they were very respectful about it, but they didn't want to push too much. Right. And then looked at it as part of the Hashgacha Pratis and of the overall picture of having had that experience, being now on a trip that is for an organization that is assisting and helping, facilitating, Beis Hashem, more people to be able to have children, and just looked at it as a opportunity to give Shavach V'edah to the Rabbi Yechiel Emanuel and to create a bit more of awareness for people who were there. I think many had come along as part of a trip, part of an organized one-day blitz of a trip, which it really was, but without a full depth of understanding of really what goes on. And Baruch Hashem, the majority of people haven't got a clue about the whole topic and the experiences and the challenges, etc. So I saw it more as the Hashgacha Pratis of the Rebbeinu Shalom saying, right, get out there and do the best you can in order to inspire people to understand that this is what the experience is, and that the Baruch Hashem is an experience that I can share to you, which has light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully inspire them as well with the Hashgacha Pratis of our own amazing Viledniker.
Right. And
that's really what it was. I think one of the things I mentioned at the time was, in hindsight, looking back at those years of going through that initial challenge. After my daughter was born, we had another 9-year break, and then we have a little 3.5, almost 4-year-old as well. So we had that sort of next... Went
through a second time.
And almost like, of course, one davens and one asks the Rebbeinu Shalom, but in hindsight, I think I look back at it as there were times where maybe the hardest part was you're davening, but not really knowing, feeling that it's going to happen. It's almost like this is what you do as a Yid, but because it's a last resort, rather than tefillah is a connection. It's almost changing the system of tefillah and understanding what tefillah really is. That it's not about telling the Rebbeinu Shalom what I need. It's not about reminding him about what I need, and he knows best and will do what's best for me to have what I need. And it's more about the connection, which takes us back to what we started our conversation with, where Sfarim explain how to do that and where that happens, and just creating an Avodas Hashem of much more connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through every facet of possibility and opportunity that comes our way. And getting up there to speak was an opportunity to maybe share that, make that admission, and share that feeling with those people who were going through the challenge of fertility, who were on that trip, to say that you are going through an Nisayon, and I understand and share an element of it. Obviously everyone's journey is totally independent, totally unique to themselves, and the challenges that they go through, it's going to be very, very personal. But at least I want to empathize with you in a way and say part of this experience can actually make us become a lot closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and can enhance our Avodas Hashem, and as Yidden, invigorate us in other areas of Avodas Hashem. And we shouldn't become hyper-focused, as hard as it may be, on that challenge, but broaden out our Avodas Hashem and see that we can become really close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in ways that would not have been possible if we wouldn't be going through the challenge that we're going through. And that brought I think 4 5 days beforehand that I knew about it to just, okay, this is what we're going to talk about.
That was the mission. It definitely shone through beautifully. I really appreciate you sharing that segment, and I'm sure many people will be able to tap into that and appreciate what you've shared, and it'll hopefully benefit a lot of people. I want to fast forward to 2022. So you had run the camp for close to 10 years, or just shy of 10 years. There's talk of war in the country that you had become so familiar with, and suddenly you become the link between Jewish refugees and the wider Jewish world. That, for the most part, is carrying on with their lives the way they always knew it. And you're rallying their cause, you're raising urgent funds, you're visiting them in the camps, you're providing support, encouragement, and so much more. Now, not many people had that kind of dual existence, living the normal comforts of the rest of the world and having a finger on the pulse of a very active war zone. Tell me about your experience straddling these two spaces at once.
Okay, so I have to bring in a few people here. There's a few very big players. Again, back Nosson Feldman, the biggest player over here.
He told me it was all you, so we'd have to pick it.
Not at all. Not at all. Nosson's the anchor and really the linchpin on which our whole connection with Ukraine, Kibbutz Tzadikim, and a lot of our Avodas Hashem that's sort of mushroomed from then and onwards is his chus, very much. So obviously, as soon as situation developed there in Ukraine, Nosson Feldman was in touch with people there, as I was, friends that we'd got to know over the years. Obviously, his friendship base is much broader than mine. He's known them for many more years. We were in touch with Rabbi Yechiel, the chief rabbi, and his family, who had been tipped off and told to get out and leave, and he was in Europe and America. We also have a couple of guys here in Manchester who came to the camp 4 or 5 years in a row, as in Shlomo Roberts, A.B. Rajna, Viledniker, and I think the first two, those guys came, I think, for 3, 4, 5 years in ago. One who came the most actually was Didi Delang.
Yes,
he holds the medal for being the.
Vinyamin's amazing. Shout out to Vinyamin.
Yeah, and so Nosson said, right, we need to broaden out. We have a charity that we set up years ago to help people in Ukraine. We helped raise money and funds for chasanas, for when they had babies. Yes. Yeah. And we would send stuff over. If you remember when Zhenya got married, we had this huge outpouring of love, basically helped for this chasana and really setting them up there initially. And this came up, we have our foundation. So Nosson said, right, we've got our foundation. There's desperate need here. As you remember at the time, it was about trying to get as many people out as possible. Mm-hmm. Those who could get out, those who couldn't get out, to help them relocate. And then Rabbi came up with this idea of almost like a refugee camp in a hotel, which is a summer hotel. It had all the features of outdoor pools and springs, but it was winter at the time when the war broke out. And so he hired this hotel, and they had it all the way through Pesach. And they took as many people as they could to there, which was bordering on Romania, and then they would see who they could get across Romania, Hungary, etc. And then that's where we got involved with a desperate need to raise funds. So Nosson suggested that we get Shlomo Roberts, Abi Rezner, himself and myself together, and we brainstormed and decided, right, let's launch this campaign. And Baruch Hashem, we raised a colossal amount. I don't remember exactly the amount, but
what was the ballpark? What was the?
I think it was around $1 million at the time. Oh. But it was phenomenal. The way that people from across the globe assisted, helped, were interested, and we kept the awareness as much as we could with updates from people who were in Ukraine, in Kiev, in the campsite, and in other places. The chief rabbi and all those feeding back to us. There was they used also a hotel in Yampala, which camp had been to, I think, once or twice, and they used the hotel in Premishlan. Those were different stations which were used as people were getting out. There was curfew during nighttime and during sometimes of the day, so it meant making these journeys and going, and there were roadblocks and setups, etc., and trying to help with that. So there was also just getting people out of Kiev. They needed to get onto buses, and the bus drivers, it was sakana for them so they were charging crazy amounts per seat on their bus, at least if they're going to make this journey with the risk that it takes. So it was real like pidyon shvoim, literally, to get people out. At the same time, there were families who were in towns that had been commandeered by Russians. Bucha, famously, near camp, there was Borodianka, another place, and there were Yidden there in and around, and near where camp was. So It was about trying to assist them, help them, and get them out as well. And that was a whole huge financially logistic operation that went on there. It came Pesach time, and Rabbi Emanuel wanted to make it as Pesach as possible for the people in this hotel. So there were a couple of amazing people who decided to go. It was relatively safe because it was within literally a few miles of the European borders, NATO borders. So you were pretty sure that missiles were not going to be fired on that area. There were people who went over to make storim for the hundreds of people that were in this hotel, and we arranged for them matzahs and basically everything for Pesach, including some nash and luxuries that hopefully would just give them that little bit of normality. I think we even ordered crockery and glassware and as much as we could. And there was a need also to bribe some of the officials in the area to overlook some of the activity that was going on in order to facilitate families remaining together, people staying together, and obviously not for public divulgence, sure, but to be able to help to assist with what needed to be done. And after Pesach, we verified that it would be safe for us to do this. Nosson and myself and my two sons, I think for them it was more of a thrill of getting the Ukrainian stamp in their passport during the war, during the initial stage of real war. We went across to visit this refugee camp, and it was an opportunity to see the people that we knew and really knew very well, and we'd been keeping in touch with almost daily, and to just see them, for them to see us, and to be able to take them a few things and then just spend a day with them, interacting, seeing where they were, understanding in real terms what it meant, in order to be able to firstly report to others and have much more of a empathetic feeling for what was going on there in the mission that we were trying to achieve. And that's what we did. So personally, I've not been back to Kiev since then, or anywhere further west than Vilednik. I'm a little scared too, to be honest. I don't want to. Kiev is still being hit randomly, but that was an opportunity to go there and see. Eventually, with time, that it emptied out as they were able to either return to Kiev, go back to their towns and cities. Right. The Russians were rebutted and gotten rid of from those areas, and some managed to go to Europe and America and try and restart their lives.
But during that period, you had to still come back home and just see the world around you, just carrying on, whilst you're being to see what's going on there and to make heads.
So it was living. I think it's part of being a Yid. That and it's what we do. It's irrelevant where and what. When something's going on with Yid somewhere else in the world, it deeply personally affects Yid, whether you know the people or you don't. And certainly, if you know them and you have what to do with them, it definitely impacts you. So we were in constant contact. It was almost like your family somewhere, and they can't go and they can't get out, but they need to see you, so you'll go and see them.
Right.
And that's what we did there. And on our return, it gave impetus and resolve to getting much more involved in seeing what we could do and invigorating our efforts to assist those to get out that could get out. There was even a group that came to Manchester for a short while, and then have moved on subsequently to the US, and to do what we could for those who we could. Once we were able to help the majority of those who we could either relocate to other places in the world, or those who wanted to go back to Kiev to do that, things sort of calmed down. Since then, it's been little pockets of assistance here and there, but
you got the support when you brought the families here to Manchester. Did the community rally the way you expected, the way you hoped, to welcome them and give them what they needed?
Even more. I mean, people were unbelievable, particularly individuals who were phenomenal, way beyond anyone's call of duty to help, to assist, to set them up, invite them, help them out in a variety of different ways, and just make them feel accepted and to give them some sort of normality in a really traumatic set of circumstances, coming to a country where they didn't speak the language. We set them up with English lessons and the Ulpan version of learning English. Get the kids into school was a whole kerfuffle as well. But there were eventually that was something that the Rabbanim were really helpful with as well. Right. And particular schools also really stepped up to, Baruch Hashem, they've all moved on. They've gone to Monsey and into Mostas there, and they're thriving.
Amazing. Kol hakavod to you, to Nosson, to the team, to putting that all together. A remarkable story. I want to get to the founding of your shul, Ohel Sholom. Now, it's clear that there was an entire community bubbling beneath the surface, waiting for the right messenger to bring it to the fore. What you have built in Ohel Sholom it's a real phenomena, and with working Balabatim who would perhaps, normally come to shul Shabbos morning looking forward to all of that Kiddush. But from what I'm hearing from them now, it's about coming for the davening. It's about coming for that experience. And I just want to share with the audience a few quotes of what I've heard from people. Davening in Ohel Sholom, you don't stay the same person. Not because Rabbi Yechiel tells you how to behave, but because how he acts as an inspiration. Another one said, not considered a Rav, but rather a Rebbe, which would tie very much back into what you teach and what you learn. Chassidus without the garb, what we mentioned. It seems like you've empowered these people to believe that they have the right to grow, that they have what it takes to grow, and that in the right environment, growth is what they will experience. And there's so many examples that people shared. Ne'ilah, people saying they couldn't sleep Motzei Yom Kippur because of what they had experienced during davening. When Purim fell out on Friday, 1.5 hours of singing in front of Aron before coming into Marav, just these different angles of everything they're experiencing throughout the year.
Didn't know it was that long.
You didn't know that. You're too far gone. Just so many different touch points throughout the year of people saying, this really shows where we're heading and the direction that we've taken with the shul. Shada Shudas, of course, growing audience week on week. From your position at the front, what did you feel was missing and what have you built to fill that gap?
Whoa, okay, that's a very encouraging set of comments. Thank you very much for that. Where did it all begin? It began with a Thursday night chabura that I gave at home to a bunch of young guys who were here in Manchester in the workforce and would come on a Thursday night for Parsha Shir. Initially, it started off with really basically going through the points of the Parsha and some very basic ideas. It moved on the next year to being Divrei Torah on the Parsha and something to say by each meal. The year after that, the request from the guys was, give us something to think about. Maybe talk a bit about how we can improve our avodas Hashem. And it really came from them. And there was a point where they would often, just as part of the banter that would go on, sometimes be there for hours and hours and hours. We should start a minyan. I said, guys, listen, I'm happy to join you if you start something, but I don't really have the time or the resources to be able to do that and to set it up. But if you do, I'm happy to join you. And then maybe 2018 or whenever it was, around then, there was an opportunity that came our way from a different shul, potentially, to join. I spoke to my Rebbe, Ram Gorovitz, my uncle, and explained to him what we'd done with what had happened with this other group, and then this offer that had come. And he said I should first give them the first right of refusal. So I went back to this group one Thursday night, and I said, look, something else has come up. If you guys are interested, then we could start something. And I think at first they weren't too sure that it was serious or that the other guys were serious. And once it became something that was more serious, they said, okay, we're going to do something. And then a group got together of guys that decided, right, we're gonna make this happen out of nowhere. So I think we said that we need a minimum of 20 people, 25 people to start, so that some weeks when you have people have a simcha or they're away or whatever, you still have a core. Yeah. They had 25 people committed pretty much straight away. They found the venue and it just started. I don't remember too much investment for myself. A few meetings of what our mission would be and what we would try and achieve. I think at the beginning we called it Ohel Sholom because they said that's one thing that we have to make sure. If we're going to open a place of tefillah, there's got to be shalom the whole time. We're going to ensure that happens, and there's got to be a transparency and a clarity between us, that there'll always be shalom. It's got to be a place of growth, where everyone's up to in their growth is no one else's business, but it's got to be a place where we know we're joining it because we want to grow in our Yiddishkeit, in our tefillah, and in our avodas Hashem and our connections to the Rabbi Yechiel Emanuel. And with that in mind, let's start to develop and see what happens. It went from small to big in a very, very short period of time. It grew and grew until Baruch Hashem we have our own place, which amazingly Mr. Halp and his brother helped us to be able to be in, and the committee at the time of, I hope I don't miss anyone out, but Uri Pavlovsky was very much a driving force there. Yehuda Halpin, Shlomi Graf, those were Penny Goldschmidt. I think those were the ones who I initially met with in my house right at the beginning, and then they drove it. And since then, it's just grown, and and the Kehillah has grown. Other people have joined. We started off in a little room. Chaim Goldman had a place at the back of Broughton Jewish, and David Badil was the first chazan, first Friday night. now lives in America. And one of my sons always reminds me he's a founding member because he was there that first tefillah. It's an amazing group of people, but every Yid has an innate wanting to enjoy their Yiddishkeit, to appreciate it. Everyone has an neshama which is very much guiding them and searching. As we know, we're Yid and we're always looking for something that's greater than ourselves and a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's just been an amazing experience where I think people have felt it's their place, they feel comfortable, they feel it's a place where you can just come in and be oneself and discover and look and search and discover more. And amazingly, everyone in their own way has the tefillahs are as you mentioned before, each year the wait to be able to start Chazar Shatz of Ne'ilah gets longer.
Wow.
There's not a minyan to start. It is unbelievable. The Hoshana Rabbah tefillah gets a little longer each year. Not because it's schlepped out. We dafka try not to schlep it out at all, ever. But just people are enjoying their tefillah, they're enjoying their davening. There's a variety of different shurim that have begun, particularly Kinyan HaMasechta. Actually, we have 2 shurim going on of that in our shul, one before the first Shachris, one after the second Shachris. And that's hugely popular. And a variety of other different shurim that go on. And I think as the people in the Kehillah really discover their enjoyment of tefillah, of Yiddishkeit, of mitzvahs, it becomes infectious. And everyone's enjoying just the experience of being part of a shul, which is their shul, part of a growing kehillah, and part of something which it's very real, very, very real.
And a lot of it's framed through the teachings of Tzaddik and things like that, which you've been building upon for all these years, are now being sent back into the next cycle. Yeah,
I'm not even sure if it's framed on that, or that's one of the things that's going on there.
Right.
It's an amazing set of people. I mean, I think people come in there and just, oh wow, we enjoyed davening. We enjoyed the shir. We enjoyed the vibe that's there of, and it's very real. Everyone's feeling. I believe that the majority of people who are part of the shul really feel that their dveikus to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, their appreciation of themselves, of Yiddishkeit, of tefillah, of mitzvahs is continuously growing, and to be part of that is a tremendous chus.
Phenomenal. Can I play devil's advocate for a moment? Because it's something I've thought about for a long time, and I've never really done this on an episode where I've come back with a different idea. But I daven in a shul that's been around for 25 years. Big, beautiful building, an established community. I joined there 10 years ago. It's not as busy as it used to be, and I've seen the same pattern repeat itself with a lot of the established community shuls. And I sometimes wonder to myself, what would it be like if all the younger generations, people who are getting married, coming back into the community, would re-enter the very shuls that were built for them by their parents and grandparents, and would channel all that energy, all that inspiration, all that desire for growth into an existing infrastructure, rather than saying we need to rewrite this and build something different and better for ourselves starting today. Is that doable? Is it achievable? Is there a reason why it's built this way, where there's a cycle and shuls develop, expand, grow, and then wind themselves down, and then the next year it could be that it has to be that way, and it's better that way. But it's just something I wonder.
It's an interesting thought. It's something I think about every so often, and I think all shuls think about it because it's a cycle that's happening across many shuls.
Right.
So some shuls, what they've done is they redesign, meaning they look to the younger group that's come in and they say, right, let's make them the Gabayim, make them the Shamasim, get them to tell us what they want in terms of shiurim. Sometimes it would be events or activities, etc. And that engages the younger crowd and brings more of the younger crowd in, because if they see it's the old guard that's still there, and it's still, well, it's the same people when we were kids are still there. And so when is it going to be something that's part of how they look at it? Or sometimes they see that, like in chinuch, you have to continuously be on the pulse of knowing what the children of today need. Your ultimate goal is always going to be the same. You want Elachid, and you want Avdei Hashem, you want Talmidei Chachamim, and you want to create the B'nai Torah and the whole infrastructure of Yiddishkeit. That's always going to be the goal, is the same. Right. How you get there has to change because the world is changing. And that's almost HaKadosh Baruch Hu was always sending us different signs from what's going on in the world and how the world's developing as to what we need to do in order to engage with the neshamas that are more sensitive to certain things or sensitive to different things than they were when we were those kids and teenagers in those days. And if that's not happening in a shul, then you're not going to get and attract that next set of youth, because they do need something that's actually a little different. So yeah, it's very possible to keep a shul vibrant and to keep it going, but I think it needs to be very hands-on, and the dynamic needs to keep changing. It needs to be dynamic in order for that to happen.
Fascinating. Okay, I understand. I've got 2 more questions to get to, and then we'll wrap up with a final. What does being a Rav really entail? Obviously, you're there for the simchas, for the milestones of families, especially of your members. You're also there for the sad times, for the bad news. You've got to juggle all the different elements and dynamics that go on with so many different families and so many different experiences. I always think that a Rav is somebody who's on a full-time job, but with a part-time salary. It's that kind of setup. How do you deal with everything that life throws at you from your own personal life, whilst also being this pillar of support for a largely growing community?
Keep davening for siyat dishmaya. You need a tremendous amount of siyat dishmaya. I see that absolutely every single week, including this past week. Just preparing for, you mentioned before, Shalosh Shudos, one of the big highlights of the week myself, or hopefully for others who come and enjoy that as well. And finding what to say, the right thing to say, the right combination, be something that's thoughtful, insightful, has depth, and that's exciting, and that I feel excited to share with others. And just the way that different pieces of Torah and Mara Makomis are, the Rabbi Shalom literally sends them in the most clear, stark ways of absolute hashgacha pratis. There's no, it makes sense, but it almost doesn't make sense. It's blatant hashgacha pratis. So sometimes just being Thursday night sitting and going through sefer from sefer to sefer to sefer to sefer, still not having anything, and then davening to Rabbi Shalom for siyat dishmaya and opening a sefer randomly, and there it is on the page, to someone randomly emailing me a contrast that they'd said they were going to send some time ago, and now they sent it and printed out, opened up to a random page this week, and there was the perfect bot to wrap up what was almost a complete Shalosh Torah. These are it's clear Yad Hashem. There's no and just reminding oneself that the whole time, and davening for siyat dishmaya, because it's not something that anyone can be doing and thinking that it's their own koiches. Right. Ultimately, we're all the Rabbeinu Shalom's children, so it's doing an avodas hakodesh for the Rabbeinu Shalom, asking the Eibishter to be the meshaleach, to give the shliach the koiches that the shliach needs. But
the mental toll that it takes, to the demand on one's schedule to prepare. You know, you're talking from the shul, older balabatim, or older people, to for the school responsibilities and everything in between, and that pile of responsibilities on your table every day.
Yeah, it does take its toll sometimes. You do need time out. I think one of the best things I did this past week was just going on a solitary 4-hour hispodidus in the mountains of North Wales, which was very, very, very invigorating. It gives time. So definitely taking some time out is finding the time to take some time out is the difficult part. But that's important, and it's siyata dishmaya. It's siyata dishmaya. There's no strategy, or do this then and that then, and do it this way or that way.
You know what your core goal is and objective is, and you're not doing this for yourself. You're doing this to support others. And Hashem said,
and I have the most amazing wife. Right. So without that, nothing would be possible. First of all, she tolerates it. Secondly, she very much is an active partner in it, particularly in the shul, very, very actively involved, and extremely supportive in a variety of different ways, whether that's emotionally, practically. Without that, none of this would ever have been possible, not from camp and not from the shul, school, just everything together.
Fascinating. Okay. I'm always curious about the art of public speaking. And I've interviewed, Baruch Hashem, a number of people. And when I come across an interviewee who's very well polished in that space, it's always something I like to ask about. What can you share with us on the topic of public speaking? What does it take to get up in front of crowds on a regular basis, to prepare relevant, engaging messages, and to share them coherently, fluently, articulately? Are there any books or personal inspirations that you came across throughout your journey from kollel to coming onto the public stage in a growing fashion over the years that's helped you build upon this and to help refine it over time?
Oh, I've never thought about this. It's still nerve-wracking every single time. I was always fascinated by Rabbi Yechiel Solomon's way of addressing people when he spoke, and then having lived with him, seen how... I remember one particular time we saw him pacing up and down one Matzah Shabbos. He was going to speak at a shuvu event, and we asked him, so what's the Mashiach thinking about? He said, I'm thinking about what to say. So we were there with an opportunity to gain as much good, so we just asked whatever came to. I said, you must know what you're going to say. It's like, you're not... There's no, I'm thinking, what does the Rabbi Yechiel want me to say? And he would always say that which he would say when he sang his daven, his tefillah before Musaf. So a person has to prepare. And then you, in addition, Rav Gurovitz, actually the once told me that the last Shabbos that I spent with my shver, he was there as well. We were walking on Shabbos afternoon to daven mincha, and Rav was going to be speaking at a big kollel event that night. And I asked him what he's going to say. So he said, we haven't fully prepared yet. The Rosh Yeshiva must know what he's going to say. So he told me that, I think it was Diane Swift, told him that when he was a Talmud in Radin by the Chavetz Chaim got all the chutznik, so sort of out of Radin, out of Litter, or out of whatever it was, those Bochrim to come together, and he had them given elocution lessons. And the words he said, these were Rav's words to me that he had heard, I think it was from Diane Swift, that the Klei Zayin from na Ben Torah is Zayin Moil, and darf wissen wie soll zu reden. So he said, and that's very important, I always think...
Translate it just for the listeners.
The armor of Ben Torah is his mouth, right. And he has to know how to articulate himself. And so he said, he always thinks before he speaks about what he's going to say and how he's going to say it. And we all know when we listen to Rosh Yeshiva how polished, in whichever language he's speaking, it is.
To hear that from somebody like that, that's
yes,
he's conscious of the concept and that it's got to be delivered.
Very much, and the responsibility of that. Wow. In addition, I just recently shared this with my Rabbi Vilednik. I still remember when I was in Yeshiva Ketana in Gateshead, walking with him on Alexandra Road, and he told me that I see you have a koyach hadibur, and there's two things. First of all, you have to use it right. So for the next 2 weeks, don't respond to anything that people say to you. Because I used to be quite sharp and flippant. So just don't respond. Just don't say anything. And the other thing is you have to start working on your hasbara. And he arranged that I should learn with a child of one of the Ramim in Yeshiva, and that was so that it always was in my mind that would be something that I would one day do. And then listening to droshes of other Chachamim and reading a little bits here and there of Sfarim in Lashon HaKodesh and in English helped to broaden my vocabulary a little bit. It was a basic education I had to give a good start to that.
The days that you were there.
Yeah, true. And we went on from there.
Right.
Still today, it's very nerve-wracking. I think preparing to speak, it's thinking exactly what Rabbi Yechiel Emanuel said. What does the Rabbi Yechiel want me to say? And that's part one. Part two is to find something that I'll be excited about as well, so that it comes across with excitement, comes across something that I'm invigorated by, so it will hopefully be shared as that. And then to try and think of how best to articulate that, so that when I say La'adam Marach, I've actually tried to do that, done the Hishtadlus. Right. Ultimately, it's known Hashem Mani Lashon. So most times when you finish speaking, I think, where was I when that just happened? Because
it's otherworldly sometimes when you're up there.
Totally in the hands of Hashem. Yeah.
That's very powerful. I appreciate that. Okay, in closing, there are some people who are focused on the historical inspiration of previous Rebbes, Gedolim, etc., and some who are very focused on the present. You very much seem to balance this, not just discovering and sharing the stories of Gedolim from yesteryear, from previous generations, obviously the work and the research you did across Ukraine and different Kvarim and things like that, but you're also someone who, as you mentioned throughout this conversation, a very strong connection with Rabbonim and leaders of our generation, Rav Aron, Rabbi Delib, Rachav, Rabbi Yechiel. In closing, as a principal of young boys and, like we said, inspiration through to older people through your shul, what message would you have for young people about the importance of building and growing a relationship with someone greater and wiser than oneself?
just do it. I mention this to the boys in school before they leave and go to yeshiva. Your Rosh Yeshiva and your Maggid Shei and your Mashgiach are not in that position because they want to be left alone. They're in that position because they took that knowing that this is the mission that the Rebbeinu Shem has given to them, and milk it for what it's worth. Have a connection with, you'll never do anything other than gain by having a connection with people greater than oneself. And your Rebbeim, your Maggid Yishurim, your Mashgichim, your Rosh Yeshiva, the Rebbeinu Shem has put them in those positions, knowing that they are the ones to be in that, the right ones to be in that position. So get from whatever you can, as I say, milk them for what they're worth, and just get as much as you can. It will help you to form lifelong relationships. It will be points of guidance that you'll be able to return to, insight into life, which over time you'll be able to get. And it's empowering, but it's also it's insightful, and it's a necessity besides for anything else. And in addition, it will give a person such a great sense of purpose and appreciation and understanding. And then you always have where to go to. Aside from the fact, and maybe most importantly, Chazal tell us, Aseh Lecha Rav, it's vital.
It seems to be such a foundational part of your entire journey. At every touch point, there was always, I went to this Rav, I spoke to that Rosh Yeshiva. It was very much, you had this clear guiding light at any juncture.
Yeah, very much. Very much. And any big decisions will always be, I'll try and call one of my Rebbeim. Personally, very lucky to have Ram Gurovitz as an uncle, which is having a Godel B'Yisrael like that being able to know that, first of all, not to feel scared to call up, knowing that the Rebbetzin will also tell me you can or you can't speak to him now, and sometimes the question will be via her, right, and I'll hear her sagely advice as well. But having that is invaluable, valuable in being able to access that, being told very clearly sometimes the answers you're so least expecting to hear, and coming out of that's real, you're getting Das Torah, and to be very subordinate to that, so very factual and realistic and honest when asking one's question. And with my other Rebbeim as well, being able to have that guidance, and in any juncture of life or even in learning sometimes, just to be able to know you can pick up the phone or go around and ask and get that guidance. And as the Mesilas Yesharim says, there's those who have gone through the maze and are in the tower in the middle and can tell you how to navigate. It's so important. Tell the Chassanim Alam with that, most importantly, when one gets to a junction when one doesn't know what to do, ask. Some people say that people don't ask because they're too proud. I don't think it's they're too proud. They're just downright stupid. If they would ask, they'd get an answer and save themselves aggravation and time. And here, but just having Rebbeim and being able to consult with them, especially in the years of being a bocha and the Kol Younger Man, whilst one has Rebbeim that are in these premier positions who are that much older than them and have that much more life's experience, depth of insight, and themselves a connection to Gedolim of the previous time, combined with their Das Torah, is something that's just, you connect to a Masorah that is very special and very unique. And every single boy leaving school and going to yeshiva, every younger man should have at least one Rebbe that they have a real deep connection, that they feel knows them, understands them, and they can be very personal with in their shaylas and getting guidance for life.
Beautiful. That's really incredible. Rabbi Yechiel, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate everything you've shared, and look forward to sharing this with other people. And Hashem should give you the continued koyach, energy, strength, presence of mind to continue inspiring, continue building people and helping the community grow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.